I'm early
Nicole,
for once.
I'm reaching for the possible towards you right now.
See,
We
this
love
is
the
what happens
possible.
when we're early. We both lose.
Earned our 20 seconds, clearly, with gestures. I appreciate the conversation you guys were having, though. Thank you, Nicole. Our thanks to Nicole Wallace. Welcome to The Beat. I'm Ari Melber. We are starting the week. I smiled at Nicole. We will be smiling again by the end of the hour based on some special stuff that we have cooking, including the delegate from Puerto Rico on what we all lived through last night. So that could be pretty interesting when you think about the Super Bowl and the cultural moment we're in. That's by the end of the hour. We begin, though, with a serious and important story about accountability and updates in the Epstein scandal. The Miami Herald, which broke this story wide open, we've shown you that before. We credit the Miami Herald with reopening that case on our timeline. Their top journalist on this story, Julie K. Brown, reporting that Trump may have had a lot more knowledge about Epstein than what was known at the time. You can see the headline here with serious sourcing, and we'll update that as we get into this story. While the top update out of Washington is that Ghislaine Maxwell, of course the convicted associate of Epstein, has now formally pled the fifth during her deposition before Congress, and lawmakers spoke out about that.
As expected, Ghislaine Maxwell took the fifth and refused to answer any questions. This obviously is very disappointing.
She was not at all pleading the fifth today. What we did not get were any substantive answers to the questions that were asked that would advance our investigation.
I don't think she had the legal right to plead the Fifth Amendment. I'll just say that, but she did.
The fact that this woman is continuing to invoke the Fifth Amendment tells us exactly what my colleagues have already stated. She is a monster. She does not care.
You can hear it there, and that includes, of course, members of both parties agreeing that this was wrong. Of course, only one party currently, the Republicans, have a DOJ that granted her leniency in her prison upgrade and a very unusual setting where she did talk. The Times reporting that she refused to answer these questions. Her lawyer said she would, quote, speak fully and honestly if she got clemency. Now, Maxwell spoke to Trump's former criminal defense lawyer, who's now the number 2 at DOJ, last summer. And at that period, she answered questions not for half an hour or clarifying. It was actually 9 hours. And I want to remind everyone that her attorney said she answered every question. This went over 2 days, and best as we understand it, although that's when she got the upgrade I mentioned, moved to a better prison, raising questions about whether that was a reward. Now, in journalism, we can tell you that circumstantially, it looks like a reward. That's circumstantial evidence that she did something, and then DOJ, which controls the Bureau of Prisons, did something for her. But there is not, for example, some smoking gun exposition yet on exactly why someone who was serving a sentence here, the only person we know of in the U.S. serving a sentence for Epstein's crimes, getting better treatment. Pretty wild. Lawmakers also building on the pressure and the loss they dealt Trump in the Epstein law, because now they're looking at Epstein files that even we in the public and journalists haven't seen even since that release, because they've got the unredacted files. One key Democrat who runs that committee, the minority side of that committee, Jamie Raskin, responding.
I believe that there were tons of completely unnecessary redactions in addition to the failure to redact the names of victims. I think that the Department of Justice has been in a cover-up mode. There are certainly lots of names of other people who were enablers and cooperators with Jeffrey Epstein that were just blanked out for no apparent reason.
Blanked out for no reason. That is a description. So if Raskin's telling the truth, that's a problem for DOJ. And if it was habitual, if it's pattern behavior defending or protecting people who are not supposed to be redacted under the law, remember, this isn't just a dispute. That would be a violation of the law. Why does that matter? Well, it doesn't mean that someone at DOJ is going to be hauled off to prison immediately. That's not the kind of law this is. But just as the law ultimately got so many of these documents out, violations of that law that are provable based on the material and going to court could get those unredacted documents ultimately out as well. People are still, of course, going through the 3 million documents. Among the files is new footage of Maxwell's 2016 deposition, where she's asked about the schemes to traffic underage girls.
Did Jeffrey Epstein have a scheme to recruit underage girls to use them for sexual massages?
Objective form of foundation.
Did Jeffrey Epstein have a scheme to recruit underage girls for sexual massages?
Object to Foreign Foundation.
If you know.
So, I don't know what you're talking about.
To be clear, I don't know what you're talking about isn't even no. It's just sort of, I can't deal with this question. The lawyer obviously doing their job to make objections for the record, but this was the pressure that was originally building up civilly. As we know, the difference from then to now is she's been criminally convicted. Now, there are more calls for accountability at these people who've popped up in the files, and we've been charting this on our timeline as mentioned. We've charted how a current cabinet member, Secretary Lutnick, had claimed in public, he didn't have to, but he went out of his way to claim in public that he'd cut off contact with Epstein. That big, sweeping, televised denial is now undercut by what you see there, him and Musk emailing about visiting the island. He's facing calls to resign or be fired. The House Oversight Chair says they could subpoena him. And again, this is still sometimes, on some issues, bipartisan. Here's a Republican on the matter.
Howard Lutnick clearly went to the island, if we believe what's in these four, but really he should make life easier on the president, frankly, and just resign. If this were Great Britain, he'd already be gone.
That's a Republican's view about the level of scandal. And as we've been careful to point out, being named in files or being embarrassed or showing poor judgment is not the same as the criminal standard. And no one is alleging that most of the names we've mentioned, for example, tonight, were proven to be involved in the actual sex crimes that Maxwell, for example, was convicted of. But at the level of judgment and the problems the Trump White House has had, including in delaying, denying, releasing these files even after they pass a law requiring it, you would think that the White House wouldn't want to just stand by someone who is now busted in their own writing requesting to visit the island. And yet the White House is standing by Lutnick. There's also a new revelation site that I mentioned, Miami Herald reporter Julie K. Brown, reporting that in July 2006, Trump actually called the then Palm Beach police chief, telling him Epstein's activities with teenage girls were well known, that he was described or remembered to have as having said, "Thank goodness you're stopping him. Everyone has known he's been doing this." That is according to a 2019 FBI interview with the police chief, which has now been revealed in these files. So again, the written records, the things that some have tried to hide, are still coming out. Apparently, Trump had told the police chief, according to this account, that he was around Epstein once.
I think we need to give the DOJ a chance to go back through and correct their mistakes.
How long do they have to do that? How long do they have to redact these files?
They're already breaking the law. Look, they're way past the deadline. And the reason they gave for taking so much time is so they wouldn't release victims' information. But in fact, they've released all kinds of victims' information.
Lawmakers speaking out after looking over these redacted files and the unredacted versions. I'm joined by Nancy Erica Smith, a civil rights attorney who's represented victims of sexual harassment and assault, and Julie K. Brown, investigative journalist at the Miami Herald, an expert on this through her reporting. Her book is Perversion of Justice, the Jeffrey Epstein story. And your piece says that basically Trump seemed to have more knowledge at the time, at least according to those accounts as memorialized. Tell us about your reporting.
Well, it seems that the police that were investigating, or I should say the FBI investigating in the wake of Epstein's 2019 arrest, went to interview the police chief again, who gave him an basic accounting of the investigation, but he also included in that account a conversation that he had with, Donald Trump, who was not president at the time. This was back in 2006. And he essentially had called the police chief, Michael Ryder, and said to him, "Thank goodness," words to the effect, "thank goodness that you stopped him, because everybody knew what he was doing." And in fact, he even elaborated about Maxwell, saying that she was sort of the operative that was helping him and that she was evil. And so, in his mind, this was the reason why he at the time, he said that he had kicked Epstein out of his club. He was no longer a member, and that he was just sort of telling the police chief that he was glad that he was now going to be arrested.
So how does that line up with this long history? there are those who say, oh, well, Trump knew things and he says he created distance. But on the other hand, they weren't just...
Joining us, MSNOW senior political national reporter Jacob Soboroff, an associate professor at Loyola Marymount University and co-author of How Bad Bunny Became the Global Voice of Puerto Rican Resistance, Vanessa Diaz. Vanessa, first to you, why was it so momentous? Why such a big deal to have Bad Bunny play the halftime show?
Well, I think regardless of the political moment, Bad Bunny has made a lot of firsts. He's been, the first artist in Spanish to win Album of the Year at the Grammys and a slew of other things. But this moment in particular, to have someone like Bad Bunny, who has broken all of these records in Spanish, is a loud, proud Latino Puerto Rican, stands up for what he believes in his music and all of the other components of his art. And so right now, we really need that voice. And I think it felt even bigger because of the political situation we're experiencing right now, where Latinos are being targeted.
What I think so interesting is that the controversy around this seems to presume among those who are outraged by it that Puerto Ricans aren't Americans. And Puerto Ricans don't deserve to be represented at the Super Bowl, as if they're some foreigners. And a former Trump press aide clapped back at that on social media. He only left the White House, by the way, a few months ago. This is Harrison Fields. He says, last time I checked, my Puerto Rican-born grandmother was a full American citizen, and she voted for Donald Trump. It's strange, given that she voted for Trump and Puerto Ricans can be, like anybody, very conservative, why they'd want to diminish or dismiss that entire voting bloc.
Well, I think that just goes to show, first of all, that people don't understand the relationship between Puerto Rico and the U.S. But in fact, yes, it's a voting bloc of Puerto Ricans from the diaspora who are in the U.S. But I also think it's this reminder of the kind of exclusion of Puerto Ricans from the national consciousness. And part of that is that Puerto Ricans on the island do not have voting rights. And so I think that this kind of idea of them as foreign others, which extends to Latinos in the U.S. mainland as well. But I think for Puerto Rico in particular, because it's a territory, many Americans don't understand the relationship. It kind of adds this other layer to the ways in which Bad Bunny was positioned as a foreign other.
And Vanessa, the symbolism throughout the show, I mean, there were a number of symbols. The one that really jumped out to me just from my time covering Trump and covering Puerto Rico post that disastrous hurricane back during his first administration were the electric poles and the drama surrounding that. That must have been very intentional.
Oh, it's incredibly intentional. I mean, that entire song he was performing there is called El Apagón, which means the blackout. And so, it's really incredible that if you know the history, then it registered really quickly. But I think people were confused. Are those fireworks? Is that a power outage? What's happening? And that's part of what he was doing in that moment, was like, it was celebratory, but it was very political. And that was the longest blackout in the history of the U.S. It lasted almost a year. And so bringing that back up in this massive stage was really important and moving.
Honestly, at one point I thought he might throw out a paper towel just to really hammer it home, a roll of paper towels.
Hello everyone, good evening, welcome to the live news update. Today we will talk about three important stories from the United States. These stories are about the Epstein case and the US economy and the immigrants and incoming. Let's start with the first story. Some members of the US Congress are now being allowed to review understand file released to Jeffrey Epstein. Understand means the information has not been hidden and blocked in the parts. Many these documents we are blocked and removed from the public views. Now started today, let's be full vision files and Republican Congress Thomas and cite the social media that plans to review these documents. According to the Secure for Families with the plan and just to this department allowing to member Congress exploitation for files private, the Epstein case have been reminder for major public issues of years. Many people have been asked of this transparency and information about this connecting and activity. Landmarks review for these documentary many leads for decision for investigation or political data in coming for week. Now let's move to secondary story. The former President Donald Trump recent spokes for the US economy and the investigation NBC and is during for the public and sides of responsible and economy sides for proud of these issues. However, to public opinion for America not to ascend for situation and many people connecting to high price cost and the experience for expenses. While someone economy for the families, these still two families for the important political issues incoming for the biggest topic, the US political note to these stories about to migration and how to respond for immigration has been spoke to should not be earlier expand and the should focus for understand immigrant for the communication crime which to target approach for importance meetings for public trust according to human focus for the help of public and the incoming for the let's scale and the different immigrants for the rights of control other immigrants political should the focus human rights the former President Donald J. Trump, the government typing this balance for security and public expensive and these shows for currently all other topics for remain important in coming for months for government official public constitute debates these issues. We will construct two fellows for stories begin for update to more information available. Thanks you for watching today live session. If you full and these likes and comments, the no more news.